Trust the power of your voice. Your voice is one of the most important things that you have that can change the world. So I want to take you on a journey with me. I joined the Army in 1988, when I was 18 years old, and I've been in the Army for 26 years. Growing up, I had this darkness inside of me, and I didn't know what it was. It was something that I didn't relate to other people. It was something that my mom often told me that she would tell that I was depressed. And I joined the Army, and I thought that that would help me to be away, and that would be how I would earn my income and go to college. And I dealt with that darkness in the Army. It was really hard for me. When I was in Germany, I went to Dachau, which is a concentration camp there, and I had a camera, and I wanted to take pictures of the experience that I had, and I wanted to remember it because so many people had lost their lives, and it was horrible. It was a place that I just wanted to remember and understand. And I had limited pictures. I had 6 pictures that I could take, so I really wanted to get a picture of something that I could remember that was powerful for me. And I found a uniform that had wooden shoes on it, and that uniform, I just looked at that and thought, somebody died that wore this uniform. And it was really, really powerful, so I took a picture of that, and I stuck it in a shoebox and forgot it. So I got called to Desert Storm, and in 1991, I went to Desert Storm, and I served in my first war. One of the most profound things that happened to me in Desert Storm was that I had to face that darkness for the first time. It wasn't the fact that I was at war. It was that I was about to face this darkness. We were in a firefight, and I was in Iraq, and I was in artillery. And so artillery was hitting on the left and then on the right of me. So what they were doing is they were homing in on our vehicle. I was 20 years old. And any 20-year-old in the audience probably thinks you're invincible. You'll never die. That's what we think. But that day, I actually thought I was going to die. I was scared to death. I closed my eyes, and I waited for that artillery shell to hit us. And while I was waiting, I opened my eyes back up, and I saw a picture of my brother and his girlfriend, and I instantly started to cry. I cried because I'd never lived one day of my life for myself. I knew what that darkness was that day. It was that I was gay, and I never let myself love anybody else. And I thought I was going to die and never be able to do that. And that was one of the hardest moments of my life. I promised myself that if I got out of that I would never, ever deny myself love again. So I did live through it. The artillery was actually friendly fire, which is kind of crazy. But I thought you guys were laughing. So anyway, I came back, and I went to college at OSU. And yeah, there you go. OSU was awesome. I was coming out, and I was really getting the wind under my wings and trying to experience and understand what it was like to be gay and joining groups and trying to find myself. I was like every other kid. I stuck stickers on the back of my bumper, a pink triangle that said silence equals death, and I didn't know what it meant. I didn't care. It was cool because I was out, and I didn't care what people thought of me for the first time. One time I pulled those pictures back out of that shoebox that I had them in, and that picture of the uniform that I took had a pink triangle on it. And I was instantly connected that somebody wore that uniform that died, and that could have been me. And that really started the activism inside of me. So at OSU, I actually had experiences in the Lantern. A kid wrote in the Lantern, and who knows, maybe he's watching this TEDx. He wrote in the Lantern that he didn't have to worry for one weekend because they had a march on Washington. And he didn't have to worry that he was going to get AIDS for the first time. It was in 1996, I think. And so I wrote back, and that was the first thing that I ever did as an activist. Is I wrote, and I said, Dan, I said, you wouldn't know me from anybody else. If you saw me beside you, you wouldn't know that I was gay. I look like you. I sound like you. I'd like the same things probably that you do. But then I said, but there is one difference. I serve my country for you to be able to say the things that you said about me, and for you to have the protection and freedom to do that. So I am a little bit different than you. And so that's what started this activism inside of me. And then I basically graduated college, and I wanted to go back into the military. And that's where my best friend comes in, Josh. So I met Josh, and he's my best friend in the world. Basically my life partner, my husband, soon to be legal in Ohio. And I had to train Josh to be a military spouse under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I had to train him the the drills. We would be sleeping at night, and it would be 12 o'clock. My soldier friends would call and say, hey, we're coming over, we're going to play video games. We would rush like a fire drill and run downstairs, take all the pictures off the wall of vacations, and I would be sitting there, and then my friends would look at, or they would call me back and say, hey, you know what, we're drunk, we're not going to come over tonight. So I was sitting in my own foyer of my own home, my private sanctuary, my safe place, with these pictures in my hands, and I looked at him and I said, I'm so sorry. And he looked back at me and said, you know something, I'm just going to go sleep at my house tonight. So those are some of the experiences that were leading up to what happened in September. I got a phone call one day that said I was being deployed again, 20 years later, to Iraq. So I had to tell Josh, I have to be deployed. Are you going to wait for me? And he didn't hesitate. He said, I'm going to wait for you no matter what. And I told him, if you wait for me, you're going to be the one, and I'm going to marry you. So I did get deployed, and I had to go train, and that was some of the hardest moments we've ever had in our lives because we had to fake and hide. I turned down the cell phone volume of my phone to where I could barely hear him speak because I didn't want anybody to know that there was a man on the other end of the line. We would text back and forth during that, and iPhone auto-corrected I love you to Oliver. Sorry, Apple. So we started using Oliver as a code word because that was a safe way to be able to say I love you and have people not question the fact that it was a guy on the other end of the line. When I got the call and I was telling Josh we were crying and it was just really rough, and I brought him home lunch because he worked from home, and while we were upstairs crying and hugging, my dogs ate our lunch downstairs. Did you get that? My dogs ate our lunch. So, yeah. So anyway, I got deployed. So before we left for Iraq, my parents had to drop us off, who are down in the audience tonight, had to drop us off, and we had to say goodbye. And we parked strategically across the drill hall behind a crane so nobody could see us. And we hugged goodbye and said goodbye to each other. And my parents, I'll never forget looking back at them in a minivan, thinking how shameful I felt that they had to sit there and watch me do that, like that, under those circumstances. It was really hard. So fast forward, right before we got ready to go, it was at an airport, and Josh actually got to come out to Seattle to be able to see me before we left. And so the families were all together, and they were all out there, and they were basically exchanging information. The wives were saying, you know, this is going to be hard, but we'll get through it. And Josh and I were under an escalator. We were hiding under an escalator, crying together to say goodbye. It was so hard. So I got on the plane, and I looked around on the plane, and I thought, man, I don't know if I can do this again. 20 years ago, I was in Iraq. And I looked at all the people that were on the plane with me, all my fellow soldiers, and they were like 20 years old. That's how old they were. The span of my deployments was the age of the people that I was with on the plane. And it kind of broke my attention because somebody came on the plane and they said, ladies and gentlemen, tonight's in-flight movie is going to be Brokeback Mountain. And it was a soldier that did that, and everybody on the plane laughed because they would never show a gay movie on, a plane full of soldiers. And I felt so empty looking around that plane thinking, you guys are mocking me. You guys are the people that you're my family. I'm leaving everything behind, and you guys are making fun of me. And so those things are starting to build up inside of me, and it just felt so wrong. It just didn't feel right. I always felt like I'm fighting for everybody else's freedom, but it's something that I don't have. I'm fighting for freedom that I don't own myself. So we got to Iraq, and it was pretty rough because Josh and I had to communicate during Iraq on Skype. And many times when we were on Skype, a mortar would go off. And I would say, that was a mortar, I got to go. And I'd hang up Skype. And Josh would be sitting there on the other end of the screen, a blank screen, thinking, is that it? Is somebody ever going to call me? Like, I don't know what that means. What's going to happen? Will they call his parents if something happens to him? And those moments were so hard for us. So I got to leave to come home from Iraq halfway through on an R&R. And Josh and I were having the best times of our lives. And we said, I wish that we could get married now. Because what if something does happen to us? What if a mortar does go off and something happens? And so we called Washington, D.C. and found out that we could get a waiver because it was a 5-day wait, and I only had 3 days to get back to Iraq. And they said, yeah, you can have a waiver. And Josh said, all right, and he hung up. And I said, Josh, did you tell him we were gay? And he said, no. And so then he called him back and said, does it matter if you're gay or not? And she said, no, honey, and she started laughing. But it's kind of funny, but the thing is that our whole lives we've been taught to accept that we might not be able to get what everybody else has. We might only be able to take what's second best. And so we get accustomed to that. So that's just our nature to ask that. So we rushed off to Washington, D.C., and we got married at the grave of Leonard Matlovich. We chose this site because Leonard Matlovich was one of the first tech sergeants that ever fought the Air Force because he was gay in the 70s. His tombstone that we got married at, and I know it sounds morbid, we got married in a graveyard. His tombstone said, when I was in the military, they gave me a medal for killing 2 men and a discharge for loving 1. And that was very, very powerful. What a better way to honor this man who fought for freedom and rights than to get married at his grave. When he died, he couldn't be married. It wasn't legal. You couldn't be in the military and be gay. So it was such a profound thing for us. I look back, and if I could have a $25,000 wedding with every perk in the book, I wouldn't take it. I'd take that day with just Josh at that site. It was the most important thing in my life. So we went back to Iraq. I wore this ring, and I wasn't taking it off for anybody. I knew that I'd have to dodge questions. So the talk of repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell came up, and it was while I was in Iraq. And I thought, how crazy would it be for the first time that I wouldn't have to worry that I would lose my retirement if somebody saw a picture on my computer of Josh? And so it's really building up inside. One of the reasons they couldn't come up with a date for the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell was that they didn't want to affect the morale of the people that were actually over there serving their country. Can't tell you what that makes me feel like. So as we got closer to September, some of the Republican debate committee, or some of the Republican candidates were saying that they wanted to reinstate Don't Ask, Don't Tell before it even got repealed. And it just felt wrong. And Josh and I kept saying, somebody needs to speak up. And so we decided to record a video anonymously at first, sent it in, and I was scared to death. I was going to come out to everybody in the world and basically ask them what their intentions were with Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So I sent it in anonymously, and I got an email from Google. Raise your hand if you've ever gotten an email from Google before. That was weird. So basically they said, we want you to show your face. Can you show your face? And I deleted it and said, no way, I'm not going to do that. This is where the human narrative starts to come in. You have to trust the power of your voice. I talked to Josh, and we decided that we needed to ask that question. They needed to understand that there are people out there serving right now and fighting for their country that deserve the same rights and opportunities. So we did. I got booed on national TV on September 22nd of 2011. The boos really stand out to America, and America spoke up about that. They thought that that was very awful, that somebody would boo an active duty service member while they were serving their country. But let me tell you something. The boos aren't what killed me. What killed me was that Senator Santorum's response to the boos was that he said, there's no place for sex in the military. So in 1 second on national TV, he reduced my entire 26-year honorable career, highly decorated, to sex. So this has given Josh and I a platform to be able to come out and to use the power of our voice. We've gone out and we've talked to universities. We traveled the entire country and speak. We've written a book, and we continue to fight. We had to fight here in Columbus, Ohio, because people didn't want to let us change our names because we put marriage was our reason, and it didn't feel right, so we fought it. We used the power of our voice and fought that. We decided to take couples to the Supreme Court, 25 couples, before the DOMA hearings. We were involved in a lawsuit with other service members to get the military statute changed that it didn't say opposite-sex spouses, and we actually won that lawsuit. We took couples to the Supreme Court right before DOMA was heard, and we were on the steps of the Supreme Court, and they said, you cannot protest, and Josh was yelling at everybody, no protesting, nobody's allowed to protest. And so we get up there, and one of the guards was watching that day, and he came over to us, and he said, you know, guys, I can't let you up there as a group, because he saw them all getting married. He said, but by God, nothing can stop each one of you couples from going up through the Supreme Court and walking down as a newly married couple. And that was one of the most powerful moments of my life. That's when I decided that if you use the power of your voice, you don't know the effect of that. I'll never know if that changed anybody that day. Josh will never know if that changed anybody. But maybe one of those justices in the Supreme Court was in there writing the decision about DOMA and was looking out the window and watching that. Don't ever underestimate what you can do with your voice. The human narrative, what we're here talking about today, is so powerful. Any one of you in this audience today, if you feel something's wrong, you can use the power of your voice and you can change the world. Thank you very much.